Okay, so we are going to continue on with heart. Once again, I do encourage you to take handwritten notes because you will have a quiz tomorrow over the first and second lectures of the heart, and you will have approximately 7 at max 10 minutes to complete the quiz. Probably more like 7, not 10. So just be sure that you have notes available. I mean, it's totally up to you. If you don't want to take notes, you are going to be at a loss. Also, when we do take the test for this, which will be very extensive, if you don't have handwritten notes, you also don't need to do the test. And no, there won't be a study guide for this test. Okay, so we're going to talk about the chambers of the heart. Tell me who knows what the chambers of the heart are. What chambers there are in the heart? What are they, Marcus?
You got the right ventricle, left ventricle, right atrium. The left ventricle, the right ventricle, the left atrium, and the right ventricle.
Okay, where are they located? Which ones are on the top? Top?
The atrium.
The atrium are, you have 2 atria and 2 ventricles. You have a left and a right atria and a left and a right ventricle. So those are the 4 chambers. The right atrium receives what kind of blood?
Deoxygenated blood.
It receives deoxygenated blood because the right side of the heart has deoxygenated blood or oxygen-rich blood, and the left side of the heart has oxygen-rich blood. So you just have to remember that which has what. So you have 2 atria, a right and a left. They are auricle, or they are kind of rounded, or like a kind of ear-shaped, both of them. You have a right and a left ventricle. They have grooves in them. That's where most of the pumping action takes place. That's where most of the pumping action takes place. That's where the most pressure is. Which would you think would be worse to have an arrhythmia in, the atrium or the ventricle?
The atrium.
Actually, the ventricles have, when there's electrical or arrhythmia type issues, the ventricle, the actual complications are worse. So ventricular tachycardia means the ventricles are beating too fast. That means they're pumping blood faster than they can receive it. Also, when that happens, that's when people are having a cardiac arrest. Ventricular tachycardia, or VTAC, is whenever there's a thing called supraventricular tachycardia, which is where it's beating really fast, but the atria are compensating. The VTAC, or ventricular tachycardia, when the whole thing's beating too fast, generally we have to shock that back into an appropriate rhythm. So the surface of the exterior surface is, as it has more fatty surface, it also has for most of your coronary artery or coronary vessels. Why do we need vessels on the outside of the heart? How else is it going to get oxygen and nutrients? And it works really hard, so it needs good supply, right? So the coronary sinuses, or the coronary sulcus, or the coronary sinuses, are very important, along with the coronary vessels that are on the ventricle. So the anterior posterior intraventricular sulculi, that is an actual groove. So we'll look at a picture of the heart, but if we look at kind of how the heart is drawn, or think about how the heart is, I'm not very good at drawing it, but it has kind of a little area here, and then you have the rest of the heart kind of here. That looks more like a Christmas stocking, sorry. But there are sinuses or sulculus that run through, that kind of separate where the septum would be, and kind of where it's able to contract. The ventricles have those as well. They have some grooves in them, and basically that's why they're there. They're there so that it can actually contract and relax back. It gives that Now think about if you squeeze the skin on your hand, it doesn't really do that. But the heart itself relates to the amount of contraction and relaxation. It has to have grooves in it that make that easier for it to go back into place and to kind of contract in. Okay, so there's a good picture of the heart itself. Now that looks similar to something y'all had to label, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Tons of information on there to label. Hopefully y'all have worked really hard on your labeling. And y'all have just about hopefully completed that because I'm going to take a grade on that tomorrow, whether it's completed or not completed. So it's either I've completed it and I get 100, or I didn't do it and I get a 0. Because tomorrow will be day 5 or day 4 that y'all have had that.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
There's some of them that you said that you want certain names.
It
Right,
tells you on
yeah.
the left side what should go in there.
Yeah, no, but how are you supposed to find them if we don't have to look at them?
So you're not going to find the exact diagram. There are many, many diagrams available to you on the internet. There are books in here. Some of you, I gave it to you when I gave it to you on Monday. Some of you did nothing with it. So when you don't do it in class, you need to be working on it at home. But there are ACE period that you're welcome to come in here and use the books. You're just not going to, you're going to have to work to find the answers to that. You're not going to find the exact diagram. So if you have the video from yesterday's lecture is uploaded, you have all of these diagrams on here. There are many ways to get them completed correctly. And it tells you, it literally does tell you on the left side what you're supposed to be labeling. You just kind of have to read that as well. All right. And so there is the posterior view of the heart, where you can see all of the different aspects of the heart there as well. It shows you the right and left atrium, the ventricles, the auricle there, all of the arteries, the veins, where the inferior superior vena cava come in, all that kind of good stuff. Okay, so the heart, the internal parts of the internal chamber, parts of the heart, the chamber. So you have. And I'm sorry I can't make this work. I have loaded it in, and I can't seem to make this particular, maybe it'll work this time. I couldn't get it to work yesterday. No. What that's supposed to do when I loaded it onto this at first, whenever you clicked on it, it would actually give you the sound, what sounded like the heart beating. And if there were some arrhythmias, it had some arrhythmias, but it won't work now, sorry. So the internal septum is what separates the right and left sides. It separates the ventricles and the atrium. You'll need to know that septum is there. It's part of that thick fibrous skeleton that keeps the heart, helps the heart keep shape. The pectinate muscle, it's the internal ridges of the myocardium. What is the myocardium? The actual heart muscle. So it's the ridges, the internal ridges of the actual heart muscle. So when we looked at those pictures yesterday, how it showed where on that endocardium where it had ridges and then it had things that were connected to it there, that would be what they're talking about here. It helps basically kind of absorb some of the as the blood comes in and it contracts and then relaxes, it kind of helps absorb. Think about when you pour water in a glass, what happens? If you pour water real fast into a glass, what happens?
It spills.
It splashes up, right? It'll splash back. Well, part of that particular muscle's job is to help keeping it from splashing out or back up into the vessel.
Blood?
The blood itself, yeah. It helps absorb the shock kind of something coming in with force. And then the intraventricular septum. So that is also the septum, the lower part of that septum that separates the ventricles. You have the right and left halves are both separated. The trabeculae, that is those would be the internal ridges of the ventricles, and the pectinate are the internal ridges of the atrium. They're part of the endocardium. Y'all remember looking at those pictures yesterday where it showed the 3 different layers of the heart? The epicardium, the myocardium, and the endocardium. Okay, so here they are. These are where you can see those ridges inside there, and then the ridges inside the ventricles, and the ridges inside the atria. Also, when you pour water over a bunch of different layers of rocks, what happens? It keeps it moving, right? Why do we need blood to keep moving? Why would it need to keep moving even when it's
Stay
in the
warm.
ventricle? To stay warm. What else? What else does blood do when it sits still?
No, it dries.
It clots. So they also help prevent clots. They prevent it from drying or sticking as well. Okay, so let's see if you can answer these questions. Which heart chamber has the thickest walls?
Atrium.
The ventricles. The ventricles have the thickest walls. What is the significance of the structural difference? Why is it more important for the ventricles to be thicker than the atria? The ventricles have to have more pressure to eject the blood out the aorta to the rest of the body, right? Or out to the lungs. When it's ejecting, it's going a longer distance. The atrium are just receiving, they're just receiving chambers. Even though there's some contraction with them to push it down into the ventricle, it's not moving anything very fast. So the ventricles have to be thick and powerful so they can get blood to go distance, right? And what do you think? Which one do they resemble better? They resemble the trabeculate carne. They resemble the trabeculate carne better.
I have no clue what any of it is.
Well, they were on those previous slides, so I'll be sure that I either rewatched and took notes, so that you know what those are, because those are parts that you labeled in some of your labeling. Heart valves. Heart valves are you have, technically you have 3 different types of valves in the heart. You have a triple flapped. Well, you have more than 3 valves, but you have a triple flapped valve. You have a double flapped valve, and then you have what's called a semilunar valve.
So you're just going with the major one.
So those are the 3 types. Those are the 3 types of valves. Now we're going to talk about. You have 2 atrioventricular valves. Those are the ones that go between the atrium and the ventricle. They separate blood flow from the top to the bottom of the heart. So you have the right AV, also called, so on the right side of the heart, you have the tricuspid valve. That's your 3-flapped valve. The right side of the heart, between the atrium and the ventricle, you have a tricuspid valve. On the left side, you have a, it's either can be called the bicuspid valve, but I would prefer you refer to it as the mitral valve. It has 2 flaps. So the tricuspid valve is on the right side, has 3 flaps. The left side has a bicuspid or it's called the mitral valve. Now, what do you think? What do valves do?
Like open.
They open and close. What do they prevent?
Flowing into the wrong area.
Flow into the wrong area, so it prevents backflow, especially in the heart. When deoxygenated blood goes down into the ventricle, as soon as that is released, more blood is coming in. So we don't want there to be a constant open hole where stuff can just continually flow through. It has to shut it off. Same thing with we're going to talk about the aortic valve. We want to make sure that only so much blood comes out of the ventricle at one time. It helps regulate blood flow. So its function is blood from the atrium to the ventricles and to prevent backflow. So there's your right AV node or your tricuspid valve. And so blood comes in from the inferior superior vena cava into the right atrium. Once it gets in and it gets to a certain point, the SA node, which is about right there, sinoatrial node, it fires and sends a signal through for blood to go down into the left ventricle. Now, somebody asked me about heartstrings. So those chordae are right there. That's what, whenever someone refers to heartstrings, this is what they're referring to. And that is where the actual valve is adhered to.
Stress or something.
Can they break through to stress?
Or like in the ear.
So they can definitely stretch. That's what causes that regurgitation or valve issues generally over time due to overwork. The elasticity of those chordae, they wear out, especially when someone's had hypertension or other heart issues, congestive heart failure, different things going on. It will wear those out. So what happens then is they go in and they put an artificial valve in there, whether it's a pig or a mechanical valve, and then they replace these and reattach.
Can they use the cows too?
They don't use cow. They generally don't use bovine valves unless someone, because they're larger than a pig valve or the mechanical valve, or larger than what we would normally have. Now, if someone has severe cardiomegaly, what's cardiomegaly, Marcus? Enlargement of the heart. If someone has severe cardiomegaly, sometimes they have to use something different, but most of the time in that instance now, they would just use a mechanical valve.
What is BFib?
VFib, ventricular fibrillation. Ventricular tachycardia, ventricular fibrillation are what is happening when you're in cardiac arrest. That's what we have to shock those to try to get it back into a right rhythm. I always crack up. All of y'all watch, or some of y'all watch the stupid medical shows, and it cracks me up every time when they shock a flat line. Like there's no heart rhythm. You never shock that. That's a chemical issue. So you push drugs like bicarbonate and some other medication. You never shock that. It is not a shockable rhythm.
So you never
You give them
shock-
epinephrine, you give them sodium bicarb, but you
you'll
never,
shock.
ever shock a flat line.
What happens if you do?
It doesn't do anything. There's no rhythm to shock.
Does it hurt?
So, well, no, usually not, because they're kind of dead.
So it's neutral.
So whenever someone has VTAC or VFib and we are shocking it, there is a heart rhythm and we're trying to change it. When there is no heart rhythm, there's nothing to shock to make a new rhythm.
You know how they
So we
shock
push
people
drugs.
like that? Does that not hurt them?
Generally, at the point where we are shocking them, they are intubated and they are given succinylcholine and usually Pavlon at that point, or some kind of sedative if necessary. Sometimes we're shocking them because they're not conscious anyway. We did shock one lady because she went from a supraventricular tachycardia to ventricular fibrillation, but she was still kind of alert. We did shock her. She was awake and she did let us know later. That was very uncomfortable. Not very nicely. But she lived, so.
So that's okay.
Yeah.
I wonder how it feels, dude. I just see Rose and Abby and they're always like, push to the epi. Clear.
Well, you're pushing a lot more than epinephrine.
I know, but that's just like what you hear.
That's why it makes me crazy and I can't watch it. Okay, so there's your right AV node. As you can see, it has, or your tricuspid valve. As you can see, it has 3 flaps. The bicuspid or the mitral valve has 2 flaps. And then your aortic and your pulmonary valves all look the same. The valves from the pulmonary veins, pulmonary arteries, and the aortic valve all look the same. They all look like that. So talk to me about the difference in these. What do you see different in those 3?
That one has like clean lines.
That's a peace sign.
It looks thicker, doesn't it? This looks a lot, the structure on those look a lot thicker than this one. They're smaller, but they look a lot thicker. Why do you think?
Because one has more blood.
Well, what's happening when those aortic and the pulmonary valves open? Blood is being injected through them at a stronger force. This is just opening and allow blood to come down. There's no strong pressure on the internal parts of those valves. Unless your blood pressure is high, the higher your blood pressure, the higher the contraction rate. So that's when those will wear out. Or if you have cardiomegaly, the heart's having to work harder to pump because there is maybe fluid on the outside of the heart. But the aortic and pulmonary valves, the actual internal structure is thicker because there's a significant amount of pressure. Think about it. The ventricles are pushing blood either to get it to the lungs or to get it out of the aorta, and it has to have enough pressure to get it everywhere else. So it's the difference in barely having the garden hose on and then having the garden hose on full force when you're sticking your thumb over it and it's shooting out. That's the difference in the pressure. Okay, so the chordae tendineae, those are your heartstrings. They're fibrous cords that anchor the cusps or the flaps to the ventricle walls via the papillary muscles. So the papillary muscles were those things. So you saw the tendonae chordae come down and they all kind of housed into this little, look kind of like a little toothpick sticking up in that previous picture. That would be where they're attached. What is their function? Their function is to prevent valves from being what? Lazy. From being what? What do you think their job is? What is the function of the chordae tendonae?
From being, I don't like, stretched.
Stretched or having the inability or not closing or opening correctly. So see, they prevent backflow. When they close, they prevent the valves from opening when they're not supposed to.
So the main purpose is
They prevent backflow. Yeah. So there's your chordae tendonae of the tricuspid valve, and then this is that papillary muscle. It's sort of like I said, it's sort of like a little toothpick sticking up with a bunch of little strings attached to it. And like I said, over time with heart disease, those can stretch or become ineffective, and so then the valve starts to leak, and then that's when they either have to go in and repair or replace that valve. That's an actual picture under ultrasound or under not ultrasound. Sorry, that's an actual image from a angiogram. When they go in with the camera to look at things, that's an actual picture of what the papillary muscle looks like in the chordae tendonae.
So the papillary muscle is like,
It comes from
what's it do?
so it's the anchor to the myocardium, to the heart muscle for those the chordae. It is the actual anchor. The papillary muscles are the anchor, what anchors it to the heart itself. Okay, so the semilunar valves, you have one. Semilunar valves include one pulmonary. Actually, you have two pulmonary valves and you have one aortic valve. They are located where? So your pulmonary, one pulmonary valve, the pulmonary valve that goes into the pulmonary artery is in the right ventricle. No, because that's where your artery is. Pulmonary, you have one that's in the right ventricle. You have one pulmonary valve that's in the left atrium, and then you have an aortic valve that's in the left ventricle, because the left ventricle is what sends blood out to the rest of the body. Okay, so they're related to the major arteries that leave the ventricles and the atria. How do we prevent them from everting? What is everting? Prevent them from like either coming too far in or flipping too far out. So you saw how thick those seams were on that compared to the other. That thick structure is what prevents them from or makes them leak-proof. So the function of all valves is to ensure one direction of flow. It prevents backflow. All valves, no matter where they are in the body, they are there to prevent backflow of blood.
What is the
Semilunar valves would be your aortic and your pulmonary valves. Your aortic and your pulmonary valves. What's their purpose? They prevent backflow of whatever type of blood they're moving. So once again, they have that thick leak-proof seam to prevent backflow of blood. I guess I didn't have my lunch. What time is it for real?
I don't know. My phone's in my bag.
Okay, good. My watch is actually right. It's just 8:21. Okay, valve mechanics. Ventricular filling and isovolumic contraction. So the AV valve opens and the semilunar valves close. So know when the atrioventricular valve, so when the valves between the chambers are opening, the valves to the vessels are closing. When the valves in the chambers are open, the valves going out of the heart are closed. When the valves going out of the heart are closed, the valves in the chambers are, when the valves for the vessels open, the valves in the chambers close. Why? So if the valves in my chambers are open, why would the vessels need
Because you don't
valves?
need to.
So it's got to get blood to send out. If they were all open at the same time, it would just kind of be a free flow, right, of blood everywhere. So it allows blood to move from the atrium to the ventricle, and then when the ventricles, when those close, then the semilunar valves open and send blood to where it needs to go. AV valves open and close, and that's called S1. I would know when the AV valve opens and you hear that, it's called S1. You'll need to know that for sure, Madison and Marcus. That is what S1 is. It's when the AV valves are open and closed. That is the S1 sound. So when you hear that, so that's for the next slide over. But when you hear this, when you're listening to the heart, when you hear the S1 is the first part that you hear. That's them opening and closing. The next part you hear are the semilunar valves opening and closing. That's why it sounds like that.
Can you actually hear it? Like if I put a thing on her or you or whoever can hear it?
That's what the heartbeat is. You hear.
Oh, that's really cool.
It's the valves opening and closing.
Oh, so wait.
Now, occasionally,
So S1
S1 is the AV valves, the chamber valves opening and closing. The first sound, that's what S1 means, sound 1. Sound 1 you hear in the heartbeat is the valves opening and
What's the
closing.
second one?
Sound 2, S2 is when the semilunar valves open and close.
Oh.
Now, occasionally you'll hear this. What that means is somebody's valves are opening and closing incorrectly. It's called a gallop. It's an S1, S2 gallop. It means like one of the chamber valves is opening and closing, and the other one is opening and closing at a different time, and then the semilunar valves are opening and closing. So it literally sounds like
How does that happen?
it's firing issues. So when we talk about electrical conduction, you read that chapter about EKGs and stuff. It has to do with the electrical conduction and it not firing appropriately. So hopefully they can fix that with an inotropic medication that makes the atrium contract better. Usually it's because one of the atria is not contracting appropriately. So they can use an inotropic medication like digoxin or usually digoxin or digitalis. And hopefully that makes it contract better. If that doesn't work, we have to go and we have to shock it to try to get it opening and closing. Generally, we do that to people when we know that they need that, but they're not in cardiac arrest. We try to sedate them before we shock them.
So do they like feel pressure in their chest?
A lot of people don't know that they even have S1, S2 gallop. It'll show up on an EKG. It will show up.
How does it show up on EKG?
It'll have an arrhythmia. It'll be what's called bigeminy or trigeminy, depending on how many extra partial beats there are. It's not the same as a PVC because it actually looks like it'll look like there are 2 beats together, and then there'll be a space, and there'll be a normal beat, and there'll be 2 beats together, but it's complete heartbeat. So and sometimes you have 3 of those, and it'll look like there's a space, and then there's another beat. Now, over time, when you get to what's called trigeminy, which is 3 and then a space, over time, that space tends to space out further. And eventually it becomes a real issue. So they treat trigeminy and bigeminy as soon as they see it. Sometimes it's real. Sometimes it can even affect the ventricular bundle, the right and left bundles, where the electrical conduction goes down into the lower parts of the heart. It can affect that. Did you have a heartbreak? No.
I think I have you told me what it was yesterday. Heartbreak. Yeah, I was told that you could have stress on your body.
Who told
Facebook.
you? And Facebook is what?
I'm not saying
They're
it's
always,
right.
they always know everything. Facebook and the internet.
No, I was told that
Well,
like
I'm
if you put
sure
enough
heart
stress
over
on your
time.
body and you become depressed, that you can like die from depression and stuff.
So I made, so people can,
Isn't it a brain?
that has nothing to do with your heart. All emotion is brain related. I mean, technically you can die from a broken heart because you get impact to the heart to the
No, I
point
mean like
that it will cause real heart damage. But actually having someone break up with you or
no, not break up, but like this tremendous loss or something.
like
Yeah.
losing some, that's what I mean, or someone dying or no, you don't.
Like
It's not, that is not heart related at all. Emotions are all brain related. People can be so depressed and have emotional issues to the point that it can lead to
they're not idiots.
other issues that could cause suicidal tendencies. They can not want to eat. They can stop using their brain function, so they can have, it can cause memory loss, dementia. Tons of things can happen to cause someone to have an emotional breakdown, and without proper help, they can do things to harm them, to cause self-harm.
Not like dogs that like die because
They stop eating. They stop eating and drinking. So sometimes people that have had a dog, and this happens a lot with military animals, when they've been trained and they're like the bomb sniffing dogs, or those kind of dogs that stay with one person for about basically the time they're 6 weeks old and that person trains them. Those dogs do have such severe depression that there are times that they do die. And it used to, they don't do this so much anymore, but used to say someone had a bomb sniffing dog or their aggressive dog or whatever their dog was for. When they left the military, if they didn't take the dog with them, or if their handler died, they would put the dog down. They would just take them and shoot them and put them down. They don't do that anymore. Now they try to rehome those dogs within a family. They bring that family in. You can do this with Air Force dogs that are either retired, that the owner or the handler has to get a new dog because their smellers not good or whatever reason anymore. So they retire those dogs at that point, and then they get to go and they rehome them over, and they give them a time to attach to anything.
There's this movie, and she has a dog, and it's a military movie. I do not remember what it is.
Max?
That's Max, maybe. It's not a girl, it's a guy. I could have sworn it was a girl. I don't know.
No, there is a movie
I'm talking
about
about
a
the
girl
seven.
that. No, it's been out in the last couple of years. About a girl
Yeah, it's
that-
We watched it in Avid, or a movie in Avid called Max. It's like
it's the
the brother
girl
died.
that's in
Yeah,
the movie.
the brother.
But she's the only girl on the base. I know that.
She's in that movie Shooter.
Is it a dog's purpose?
Maggie
no,
something.
it's a
The
dude.
girl's name is Maggie.
But at one
Maybe
point
not.
he was a girl.
But what I'm saying, I think I have circulation problems.
So the dude was a
Is that
girl.
what I'm talking about? All the
Yes,
skin
like
and
the
stuff?
person.
I will literally just lay down in bed and
No,
my
with the
legs start
person,
to
no.
That may not necessarily be circulation.
Because the dog
That
was a
sounds
boy at
more
first, but then it became a
neurological.
girl.
Okay, guys, remember I'm recording. Okay, so back to what we're talking about. Ventricular pressure continues to rise, and momentarily before ejection, those valves open and close. Ventricular injection is what happens to the semilunar valves. When the semilunar valves are open, the atrioventricular, or the valves between the chambers, are closed. Ventricular ejection has a lot of pressure, and then it kind of brings that pressure up, and then it slows down. So it's also what happens with blood pressure. When we check a blood pressure, we have a systolic and a diastolic. Systolic pressure is when the heart is contracting. Whatever that is, the pressure that the heart needs to contract and send blood to the rest of the body. What the diastolic is, or the bottom number, is the pressure of your heart at when it's relaxed. So that's what that pressure dropping, and the ventricular pressure, that's when it drops. Semilunar valves open and close. Once again, that is what S2 is. The semilunar valves open and closing. So it basically means S1 means sound 1, sound 2 when you hear a heartbeat. Okay, and then you have what's isovolumic relaxation, and that would be what the amount of pressure that the heart has at rest. Now, how long does your heart actually rest between beats?
Like 2 seconds.
Not even that long.
0.2 seconds.
It's usually about
seconds.
0.02 to 0.03 seconds. There's very little. And when we look at EKGs later, you'll be able to count the distance between heartbeats. Okay, so here we're looking at S1. This is what it says while it's talking about circle it. So right here, this is what is happening when S1. These particular valves right here are opening with S1 and closing. So blood is going down into, so they're opening and closing. That would be S1. S2 is when your semilunar valves are opening and closing. Those semilunar valves are opening and closing. So see, there's opening, and then this is with them closing. That would be what S1 sounds like. And over here, you see the semilunar valves opening, and then the closing here. That would be what the S2 sound is.
So that's just like constant.
And it's constant.
Oh.
From the time it starts beating until you die.
Does it not get tired?
Okay, you're not going to page 730 because I haven't printed that for you yet. So remember to go over each question before you go in the text. So in our text, you know, at the back it has, when I print out the, it has those questions at the back. The chapter, it has the summary of the chapter, and then after that it will have questions, multiple choice, and it'll have some fill in the blank. Y'all get those every time I print stuff off and give to you. And they're past the glossary where all of the vocabulary is. Yes, there are questions back there. Be sure that you know the flow of blood through the heart. Be sure you know what happens with the flow of blood in the heart. And know what S1 and S2 are. Be sure you know all of the valves and all of the portions and parts of the heart. Be sure that you are very capable of writing out. And I do say writing out because this cardiovascular test will not be multiple choice, ladies and gentlemen.
Can I take a picture of that? Or are you gonna touch it?
You have that. It's in your diagram.
No, the exact like order.
You actually have that in your diagrams. If you read the left side of your diagrams, you actually have one that gives you all that information.
Are you gonna post this stuff? Like the video?
The video will be up. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, and then we're going to talk about coronary circulation tomorrow. So we're going to stop there a little bit early. You guys need to go back through your notes. Be sure that you have some summaries done. Be sure you put some questions out there because once you go through your notes, you're going to have questions. So be sure, because I may check your notes to see if you have questions out to the left. I may check your notes here directly. You know, like tomorrow before your quiz, I might check to see if you have, what else I might check to see if you've done some summaries, all that kind of stuff. So y'all might want to be sure you